cheery girl at the checkout counter said to me. The only problem was I wasn't having a nice day. The day before, our new refrigerator went on the fritz. The repairman couldn't fix it. He was going to bring a rental the next day, but it wasn't there yet. We lost all our food. Then the rain came and the basement flooded and maybe it was connected, but our water heater blew up, so I had a cold shower that morning. It was a Monday, and on the day I'm going back to work, I'm going in, and someone cut me off in traffic. And even though they cut me off, they had the politeness to give me the one-finger salute. And then to top it all off, I got to the church office, and on my desk was one of those while you were out notes from my secretary. Someone overnight had left a little feedback. Loud service yesterday. So I just was ready to bite someone's head off. I didn't have a choice about how my day was going, about what was happening to me, but I did have a choice about how my life would go, about how I would react. Would I bite the head off of that cheery clerk who had the nerve to tell me what kind of day I have? My spiritual gift is sarcasm. I wanted to say, no thanks, I already have other plans. But I didn't say that. Would I take it out on her? Would I take it out on my family? Would I let circumstances run my life? It wasn't exactly my finest day, but it was nothing compared to the day that Joseph, son of Israel, great-grandson of Abraham, was having. To put it mildly, in Genesis chapter 39, verse 1, Joseph is not having a nice day. Genesis 39:1, now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt. Was he on vacation? Joseph, you just had the worst day of your life. Your brothers tried to kill you. Where are you going next? I'm going to Egypt. Not on vacation. He's sold into slavery. Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him down there. Joseph is a victim of what we now call human trafficking. Sold into slavery by his own brothers. He's far from home, he's lost everything, and he's all alone. Verse 2, the Lord was with Joseph. Wow, hold the phone. The Lord was with Joseph? Well, then why was he in Egypt? Then we read, he was a successful man. Wait a minute now. Successful? Him? He's a slave. What kind of success is this? Someone else's property with no rights. That's not the kind of success that you write home to Dad about. Dad, you're never going to believe the good news. I got that slave position I've been working for all my life. What could this possibly mean? He was a successful man. Certainly not in the eyes of the world. But how about in the eyes of God? Did it occur to you that in God's eyes, success might not be where you are, but who you are? Not what happens to you, but how you react? Let's look today at the story of Joseph in Genesis 39 and learn how it's not what happens to him that makes him what he is, but how he responds to what happens to him. And this is good news for all of us, because we are never in complete control of what happens to us, but we're always in complete control of how we react. So today, let's learn how you can change your reaction and change your life. First, let's look at Joseph's reaction to deserved trouble in verses 1 through 6. Joseph had been taken down to Egypt. Wait a minute, you say, deserved trouble? Joseph's mean older brothers, in chapter 37, last week, first tried to kill him and then sold him into slavery. How in the world is that deserved? Nobody deserves that. That is certainly true. But if you were here last week, if you remember chapter 37, then you recognize that Joseph has to at least have contributed somewhat to how his brothers felt and what they did. Why? Because Joseph first reveled in being Daddy's favorite. He strutted around in a special Dad Loves Me Best t-shirt. Second, he spied on and tattled on his brothers. And perhaps worst of all, third, he had those pompous dreams about his brothers and his mother and father bowing down to him. And then he insisted on telling them in a vain way. Now, does that excuse his big brother's resentment and awful behavior? Of course not. But on his way down to Egypt, Joseph has had some alone time. Take a look at himself. And perhaps for the first time in a long time, to see himself as he really was. And maybe he didn't like exactly what he saw. Oh, his shrink might have blamed his father, Jacob, for making him his favorite. And Joseph probably would have been tempted to get bitter and blame his brothers 100% for what happened. He was probably tempted to whimper, "Why me?" But if he was completely honest with himself, he would have to figure out why him. So Joseph has to have had at least acknowledged that where he was, partly he had to blame himself. He's not to blame for where he is and what his brothers did, but he does have to take responsibility for his own choices and actions. You can't go through life blaming everything on everyone else and get ahead. Neither can you spend your whole life beating yourself up for what you didn't do. But you can be honest with yourself and take responsibility for your own choices and actions. You can confess your sins to yourself and to God and to others you've wronged. Only after you have admitted your failures can you correct them. So confess and forsake them. And only then can you move on. If Joseph spent all of his time in Egypt hating his brothers, he never would have been successful. And he never would have accomplished what God wanted him to do. So can I ask you, are you going through something right now? It's at least healthy to honestly ask yourself, did I do anything to bring this on myself, even partially? If you did and you don't admit it, you're going to be surprised to find it keep on happening to you. But if you admit it, confess it, and forsake it, you can not only move on, but you can learn and grow, and maybe get ahead in a getting by world. Let's keep reading in verses 2 through 4. He was in the house of his master the Egyptian, and his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all he did prosper in his hand. So Joseph found favor in his master's sight, and served him. So his master made him overseer of his house, and all that he had, he put under Joseph's authority. You have to notice here, Joseph was not stewing about what happened to him, or blaming anyone. He wasn't getting bitter, he was getting better. But it's not primarily here what about he wasn't doing, it's more about what he was doing. Notice he was doing his job, serving his master. Now, I am in no way here condoning slavery. But your job probably comes with a master, doesn't it? We may call them bosses or supervisors or teachers or officers today. But you simply cannot get ahead in life if you are not doing your best to serve those who are signing your paychecks or filling out your report cards. So the Apostle Paul tells servants in Colossians to serve their masters heartily as to the Lord, not with eye service. As a follower of Christ, you should be the best and hardest worker wherever you work. I remember being a dishwasher in college and having one of my coworkers look at me and say, whoa, Jeff, slow down. You're making us all look bad. Now, it's not my job to make my coworkers look bad, but it is my job to make my boss look good. And not only let them see me working hard, but see why I work hard and who I serve, the Lord. And friends, it's not only about work. Where do you find yourself? Maybe in a place you don't want to be. Maybe an unemployment line. Maybe a chemo ward. Maybe a funeral home. Like Joseph. If you're in a place that you didn't and wouldn't choose, make the most of your present situation by serving others. Maybe others you never would have gotten to serve if you weren't there where you didn't want to be. Remember, the key to success is not how many servants you have, but how many you serve. Joseph was successful not just because the Lord blessed him, but because he served his master. The free enterprise system is not an economic system built on greed. It is rather built on service. The more people you serve, the greater will be your reward. So don't react to your circumstances by pouting, but by serving. Like Joseph and like Jesus. Jesus, who himself said, I didn't come to be served, but to serve and give my life a ransom for many. So, ask yourself the question, did I come to be served? If so, you'll be disappointed. Or did I come to serve? Let's read on in verses 5 and 6. So it was from the time that he had made him overseer of his house and all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. And the blessing of the Lord was on all that he had in the house and in the field. Thus his master left all that he had in Joseph's hand. His master did not know what he had except for the bread which he ate. Joseph worked hard with a good attitude. And he found himself getting ahead and getting by world in Potiphar's house. First he was just a slave, but then he was the new kid on the block, but then he became the head of the slaves because Potiphar could trust him. And then he became the head of the whole house. He left all he had in Joseph's hand. We're going to see this pattern over and over again. We're going to see in this chapter. Not only because Joseph had the blessing of the Lord on his life. That's our excuse for our failure. No, he had the blessing of God in his life because of his reactions, because of what he did. He was faithful and trustworthy. Too often we ask for the blessing of the Lord on our lives when we're not doing what he can bless. We say, Lord, bless me. But what we should be saying is, Lord, make me blessable. Generally speaking, if you make your boss successful, your company successful, they will make you successful, promote you, reward you. In many ways, we promote ourselves by our own faithfulness, hard work, and integrity. But even if they don't, and take advantage of you, take credit for your work, be faithful and trustworthy anyway. If your boss won't reward you for your work, someone else will. As Galatians 6:7 says, we learned last month, God is not mocked. You reap what you sow. So be faithful and trustworthy to make others successful, and God will make you successful. You see, from Joseph, we can learn that it's not what happens to us that determines our success, but it's our reactions. Do we blame others and quit? Or do we keep on keeping on, serving faithfully? Our circumstances don't make us what we are. They reveal what we are. So what are you? Change your reaction and change your life. Second, let's look at Joseph's reaction to intense temptation in verses 6 through 12. We've seen how he's reacted to tough circumstances that he himself might have been at least partially responsible for. Now, let's see how he reacted to the intense temptation that comes with success. Verse 6, sidebar, you got to know, Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. I don't know how they say it today. In my day, he was a hunk. And verse 7, it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast longing eyes on Joseph, and she said, lie with me. Wow. She's not subtle. She throws herself at him. We don't know if she's young, a cute middle-aged woman, or an old hag. But this, anyway, is got to be some kind of intense temptation for Joseph because A, he's young. 17, he is a fountain of raging hormones. Worse, B, sexually, she's coming on to him, probably dressing provocatively. And C, in his conscience, he's far from home and not accountable to anyone. And D, psychologically, think about it. He's been rejected by his family. In his self-pity, he might feel like he needs some acceptance, some affection. And E, when it comes to ambition, having her on his side couldn't hurt his career. And F, he could always blame her because she came on to him. Was it tempting? Well, it wouldn't be character building if it wasn't. But it's important for us to remember that temptation is not sin. Jesus was tempted. Whether you are tempted by others or by your own desires, God will not judge you for being tempted. He will judge you for how you react. So let's see how Joseph reacted and how we can change our reaction to temptation and change our life. Let's look at verse 8. He refused. His master's wife said, lie with me, but he refused. He just said no. People can make sin look so appetizing. Satan can be so persuasive. But no one, absolutely no one, can make you say yes. The text of Genesis is so blunt. He didn't think about it. He didn't try to reason with her. He just refused. I think that means that he hadn't been lusting after her already, which would have tended to make him seize the opportunity when it presented itself. I think this means that he'd already made up his mind what he would and wouldn't do in Egypt so far from home, that he would keep himself pure. And this, my friends, is a great practice to get into. Do not try to battle temptation when it comes down the pike. You want to make it, not on the fly, you want, while you're clear-headed now, to make up your mind beforehand about wrong. Don't wait for it to rear its ugly head and then consider it. You'll be much more prone to fall for it. Make up your mind ahead of time. Choose not to sin, and then don't reconsider it. Just immediately refuse. I've seen this power in my own life. I have chosen, when I'm in a clear mind, to be honest. When I get too much change, I'll always give it back. Now, I had a real problem in Baltimore. There, the bankers conspired against me. It seemed like almost every week they gave me too much money. And if I would have thought about it, I'd say, sometimes they short me. They probably owe this to me. But I'd already made up my mind, I'm going to give it back. Sometimes I gave it back so quickly, I thought, oh, they really owe me. I should have kept that. But without giving it any thought, because if I gave it some thought, I might be tempted to keep it. I'd give it back. Why? Because I don't want for a few bucks to sacrifice my integrity. Maybe the Lord's testing me. Maybe the tellers were testing. Here goes the preacher again. Let's see if he's honest. I don't know, but it's not worth it to me. I've seen the power of this in a few Potiphar's wife moments as well. Friends, don't think about it. Don't let your life be ruined by an impulse via the counter. Choose beforehand how you will react. Change your reaction and change your life. Verse 8 and 9, he refused and said to his master's wife, "Look, my master does not know what is with me in the house. He has committed all that he has to my hand. There is no one greater in this house than I, nor has he kept back anything from me but you, because you are his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" Yes, he said no first. That's all you need to say. But it was the boss's wife. So he did have to explain. So he reminds her, my master, your husband, my master, he may never find out, but I will know. How can I do this to him? He trusted me. And then Joseph, not so subtly, reminds her, you are his wife. Wait a minute. He is my master. How can I do this? You are his wife. How can I do this? Put those two things together. He's my master. You're my wife. Sorry. I'm not be confused. He's my master. You're his wife. So what he does is he zooms out and he gets the big picture. If you zoom in, you get the small picture. She's beautiful. She's available. I'm ready. But if you zoom out, wait a minute. I can't do this. He's my master. She's his wife. So what he's doing is zooming out and taking a look at the big picture. How will this affect me in the long run? What if this was known? I don't want it known, and why should I say it or do it? What if it's not known? I'll still know it. How will this hurt others? Don't just think about yourself. See it through their eyes. What would this do to him or her? And never face temptation as a virtual atheist, as if God doesn't exist. What would God think about this? Notice Joseph doesn't say, how can I do this to your husband? But he says, how can I sin against God? Every time we sin, we not only minimize sin, but we relativize God. We say, sin's not that bad, and God doesn't care that much. Friends, make up your mind beforehand about sin. Keep in mind, while making up your mind, that after you refuse, the big picture. How will this affect me in the long run? How will this hurt others? How will this hurt God? And notice in verse 9, how then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? Notice the way he phrases the question. It's very important how you phrase the question, right? We can say something and ask expecting a yes answer. You want this, don't you? Or we can say something expecting a no question. You don't want this, do you? When you take a survey, the person who gets to phrase the question usually determines the results. Are you pro-life? Yeah. Are you pro-choice? Yeah. Are you anti-life? No. Are you anti-choice? No. So however you phrase the question kind of determines the results, right? Notice how he phrases the question. Not, how can I not do this? He says, how can I do this? Joseph doesn't ask, how can I not do this? That's what a weak person says, declaring their own helplessness. They make light of sin, and they lie to themselves and say, I have no choice. But Joseph, the strong person, says, how can I do this? Declaring his own responsibility. He admits the wickedness of sin, and he faces the stark truth. I do have a choice. I am not helpless. That's what makes the choice so wicked. I choose sin. And Joseph chooses no. The story goes predictably in verse 10. So it was, as she spoke to Joseph day by day, she didn't give up, she kept on, that he did not heed her, to lie with her, or even to be with her. She pours it on, tries to wear him down. Can you rub some lotion on my back? Tries to catch him off guard. Oops, I dropped my towel. But he says no. And he says it again and again. He says no means no. Kind of sounds like an episode of Dr. Seuss' Green Eggs and Ham to me. She says, would you in a box? Would you with a fox? And Joseph says, I would not, could not in a box. I would not, could not with a fox. I cannot do that here or there. I will not do that anywhere. I will not do that with you, ma'am. It is not right. It's not who I am. Not by Dr. Seuss. That's by Dr. Hartman. Notice, Joseph will not listen to her, and he begins to avoid her, even being around her. Remember, Jesus taught us to pray the Lord's Prayer, lead us not into temptation? God usually doesn't lead us into temptation. We lead ourselves there. Don't put yourself where the temptation will be. Verse 11, it happened about this time when Joseph went into the house to do his work, and none of the men of the house were inside. He'd been avoiding being alone with her, but now she sent all the men out to clean the pool or something, and now they're alone. Verse 12, she caught him by his garment, saying, lie with me. But he left his garment in her hand, and he fled and he ran outside. He saw that look in her eyes, and he knew he was in trouble. She grabbed him, and he did the right thing. He ran. In 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 18, the Apostle Paul warns us, flee sexual immorality. 3 powerful words. Flee sexual immorality. I think when he wrote that, he had this story in mind. Paul tells us, don't stick around and try to resist temptation. Flee it. If you hang around and try to resist, you'll most likely give in. But you'll get in trouble either way. Get out of Dodge. When I was younger, I was a Bible teacher in a Christian school, and I was teaching a group of 8th graders 1 Corinthians. We came to chapter 6, verse 18. And I said, notice these 3 words, flee sexual immorality. Notice that Paul doesn't say resist sexual immorality. Boys, girls, if you resist, you'll give in. Don't resist, flee. At the end of the week, I said, we're going to have a quiz tomorrow in 1 Corinthians chapter 6. And I'm going to give you the first question. The first question is, true or false? The Bible says, resist sexual temptation. And friends, here's the answer. It's false. It doesn't say resist. It says flee. Sure enough, I gave out the quiz the next day, and 50% of the class got it wrong. They put true. So on the next day, Monday, I said, friends, I told you it was going to be false. It doesn't say resist temptation. It says flee temptation. I'm going to put that question on the section test. Sure enough, when the test came up, I reminded them the day before the test, tomorrow, question number 1 is going to be true or false. The Bible says resist sexual temptation. The answer is false. 1/4 of the class still got it wrong. So I said, friends, that's going to be on the final exam. Sure enough, on the final exam, the very first question was true or false. Resist temptation is in the Bible. No, the answer is false. Still, 10% of the class got it wrong. I wanted those young 8th graders to learn not to resist temptation, but to flee. Very important, that 8th grade class, 2 of those young men are now pastors. One of the young ladies in that class is now my sister-in-law. She married my little brother. I'm glad I taught them not to resist temptation, especially sexual temptation, but to flee temptation. Friends, when the trouble hits, how you react changes your life. When temptation hits, how you react changes your life. So, make up your mind, refuse, look at the big picture, and when push comes to shove, quite literally, flee. Change your reaction and change your life. Now we have the fury of a woman scorned. She wanted him, but he humiliated her. So now she wants to destroy him. Verse 13, so it was, when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and fled outside, that she called to the men of her house and spoke to them, saying, see, he has brought into us, your master, my husband, has brought into us a Hebrew to mock us. He came into me to lie with me, and I cried out with a loud voice. Now this reveals to us the shallowness of sexual temptation. Sexual temptation promises pleasure and commitment and never delivers. It only delivers selfishness and callousness. So she pits the men against their boss, her husband, plays the race card, this Hebrew, plays on their jealousy, this foreigner who came in and took over, and then she lies about him and makes him out to be the aggressor. Verse 15, she says, "It happened when he heard that I lifted my voice and cried out, that he left his garment with me and fled and went outside." So then she kept his garment with her until his master came home. For the second time, Joseph is going to get into trouble because of his garment. She's saying, just wait till your master gets home. You can bet she's waiting at the door for him when he comes. Verse 17, she spoke to him with words like these, saying, "The Hebrew servant whom you brought to us came into me to mock me." She's rehearsed the story. She's blowing up, and again, she's blaming her husband for bringing Joseph to the house. She plays the race card, and she tells him the cooked-up story. "So it happened, as I lifted my voice and cried out, that he left his garment with me and fled outside." Verse 19, "So it was when the shepherd heard the words which his wife spoke to him, saying, 'Your servant did to thee after this manner,' that his anger was aroused." Well, of course. But wait a minute. We are so quick to assume that he's angry at Joseph for going after his wife. The text never tells us who he's angry at. There is another possibility. Potiphar knows his wife. Maybe she has a history of cheating or throwing herself into help. He also knows Joseph well. Joseph has proven himself to be honest, faithful, and trustworthy. This doesn't sound like Joseph. Maybe Potiphar's actually angry at his wife for lying and backing him into a corner in front of everybody and forcing him to get rid of his best guy, the one who's brought the blessing on the whole house. I tend to believe that's what made Potiphar angry, especially because he doesn't have Joseph killed, but only thrown into a posh, low-security royal prison. Does this sound to you like a jealous husband? Third, let's finally see Joseph's reaction to undeserved trials in verses 20 through 23. We've seen how he reacted to tough circumstances that he himself had been at least partially responsible for. We've seen how he reacted to the intense temptation that comes from outside. But now, let's see how he reacted to the toughest of all situations. Those unfair ones where you are blamed but not at fault, falsely accused and totally innocent, punished for what you didn't do. Verse 20, Joseph's master took him and put him into prison, a place where the king's prisoners were confined. And there he was in prison. Now, prison's better than death, but it's still prison. And it's a prison in Egypt. His dad doesn't know he's alive, can't come to visit him. Young teenage Joseph is alone in a foreign land. And he's no longer a slave, he's now a prisoner. How low can you go? Now does Joseph feel sorry for himself, throw in the towel, lose heart, lose faith? Now does he get bitter and curse God? Oh, verse 21. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of prison. The cream always rises to the top. Joseph keeps getting put down, but he keeps landing on his feet and climbing to the top. He knows he was partially responsible for being sold into slavery in Egypt, but he's totally innocent, doesn't deserve to be in prison. He knew God would judge him for being in prison. Being a slave didn't define him, and now being in prison doesn't define him either. His story reminds us it's not what happens to you that makes you what you are, but how you react. And the great thing is that while you are rarely in control of what goes on around you, or what happens to you, you are always in control of what goes on inside of you, how you react. So if you change your reaction, you can change your life, like Joseph did. This reminds me of the words of a man in the New Testament who was thrown into prison for doing right, the Apostle Paul. He wrote from prison in Philippians chapter 4, verse 11, "I have learned in whatever state I am, even prison, to be content. I know how to be abased." Paul, Joseph, abased in prison. "I know how to abound," be on top, everywhere and in all things. "I've learned to be full and be hungry, both to abound and to suffer need." Notice the word learn there. This is something that you can learn. Joseph and Paul didn't let their circumstances control them. They're in control of their reactions, so they're in control of their lives. And notice verse 13. Paul said, "I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me." This is not I can leap tall buildings in a single bound like Superman. All things in verse 13 goes back to all things in verse 12. The all things are being up and being down. And here is the secret of contentment, friends. Being in control of your own life, not what happens to you that makes you what you are, by how you react. So change your reaction, change your life. Verse 22, here we go again. The keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners who were in the prison. Whatever they did there, it was his doing. The keeper of the prison did not look into anything that was under Joseph's authority, because the Lord was with him. And whatever he did, the Lord made it prosper. Here we go again. In Potiphar's house, he goes from slave, the head of the slaves, the head of the household. Prison, Joseph goes from prisoner, the head of the prisoners, to the head of the prison. Why? Because the Lord was with him? Yeah. But that's not just for the few, the select. Not for me. No, no, no. The Lord was with him because of the way he reacted, because of what Joseph did. Notice verse 22, it was his doing. Whatever he did. You see, Joseph didn't waste any time asking the useless question, why did this happen? Rather, he asked the more important question, what can I do? Never ask, why did this happen? Usually you won't get an answer. But always ask, what can I do? There's always an answer to that. When life gives you lemons, don't ask, why did this happen? Ask, what can I do with these lemons? So you see, if you and I stop asking why, getting down, and start asking what, getting busy, God can be with us too and make what we do prosper. You see, it's a funny thing. If all we do is pout and ask why and don't do anything, God can't make what we do prosper because we're not doing anything. So let's change our question from why to what and change our life. You see, we are not in control of our circumstances, what happens to us, and usually can't know why. But we are in control of our reactions, what we do, and usually can know what to do. So no matter what, slavery, in prison, in traffic, in trouble, deserved or undeserved, in temptation, do right and leave the consequences to God. Do right and let the Lord make it prosper. I am not in control of what happens to me. I'm not in control of what happens to my appliances. Oh, my refrigerator got fixed. My basement got dry. My water heater got fixed. That angry driver, I'll never see him again. Oh, I got to tell you the end of the story. That note on my desk, I took the note out to my secretary to complain. I can't believe they called in and said, loud service yesterday. She goes, oh, I'm sorry, you misread my writing. It says, loved service yesterday. Sometimes we let a mistake ruin our day. So what did I say to that cheery bank teller who told me, have a nice day? Did I say, no thanks, I've already got other plans? Or quit telling me what kind of day to have? No, I said something like this. Well, to be honest with you, it hasn't been the greatest of days. But I serve a great God, have a great wife, a great family, a great job. I've got a great life, and you know, I choose joy. I learned from Joseph, I learned from Paul. I don't choose what happens to me, but I choose my reaction. And friends, we can't change what happens to us, but we can change how we react. And if we do, we can change our lives, and we can change others. Let's pray. Lord, thank you for this practical lesson from the life of Joseph. Lord, may we learn from Joseph and from Paul not to let circumstances get us down, but to change our reactions. Lord, help us to react to problems, deserved and undeserved, with joy. May we react with temptation, with refusal, and with integrity. Lord, would you change us as we change our reactions? Lord, if there's one person here this morning who's never trusted in Christ as their Savior, I pray that today they would make the mistake of thinking that it's just changing our reactions that gets us to heaven. It's not our good works. Lord, may they realize this morning it's only through your sacrificial death on Calvary that they can come to know you and be forgiven of their sins. Lord, I pray that today that I ask you to forgive them of their sins because of your grace, because of what Jesus did at Calvary. Lord, for those of us who are your children, Lord, may we allow you to bless us and to change our lives by the way that we act and react. In Christ's name we pray.